Hi, Timothy.
All right, Councillor Silovitz, we are live streaming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ban. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to HRH meetings. I'd like to welcome everyone to this September 14th Heritage Richmond Hill meeting. This afternoon's meeting is an electronic meeting being held pursuant to Section 2383.3 of the Municipal Act 2001. I'd like to advise that at yesterday's council meeting, council appointed Annette Ivsina as the new member representing the Richmond Hill Public Library on the Heritage Richmond Hill Committee for the remainder of this term of council. She will be joining Heritage Richmond Hill at our next scheduled meeting. Please note that we have received regrets from committee member Nancy Spinks for this meeting. The public had the opportunity to submit written correspondence regarding agenda items by email to the clerk's office. All written correspondence received by 12 p.m. noon yesterday would have been included on the agenda, but there was none received. The public also had the opportunity to apply to appear as an electronic delegation, either by video conference or by telephone by 12 p.m. noon yesterday, and we have received 3 delegation requests who wish to speak to agenda item 6.1. So I'd like to welcome them as well. As chair of this committee, I will now call the meeting to order. So the first thing on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Could I have a committee member raise their hand to adopt the agenda, please? Thank you. Barbara DeMambro. All those in favor, just raise your hands. Committee members. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Next item is disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Anybody with that? Seeing none. Okay, first item of business is the minutes of our previous meeting. So that's agenda item 4.1, minutes, Heritage Richmond Hill meeting, HRH 0523, held June 15th, 2023. A, that the minutes of Heritage Richmond Hill meeting, HRH 0523, held June 15th, 2023, be adopted. May I have a member of committee? Thank you, Diane. Diane McLeod. And may I have members of committee please agree? Thank you. That passes unanimously. And then 4.2 is the extract. Council meeting C2423 held June 28th, 2023. A, that the extract from council meeting C2423 held June 28, 23 regarding staff report SRPI 23061, heritage permit and authority to enter into a heritage conservation agreement, 103 Richmond Street, be received. Could I have a member of committee raise their hand? Councillor Davidson, thank you so much. All those in favor, members of committee only. Thank you, that passes unanimously. Delegations we do have, and I just need to go, we're going to go straight to 6.1. I just need to go to my other one, hang on. Okay, sorry, Ron, I'm having a problem here finding the names.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, the first delegation is a Miss Joyce Horner.
Okay, thank you so much.
Helen Lung and then Mark Jones.
Okay, thank you. Then if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it. Ms. Horner, you have the floor. Welcome. There she is.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello, members, council, and staff. My name is Joyce Horner, and I've lived in Headford my whole life. I did serve on this same committee as you for approximately 15 years. I'm also a longtime member of the Richmond Hill Historical Society, as well as the Pennsylvania German Folklore Society of Ontario. My family has a very rich history here in Headford and in Richmond Hill. Around 1805, my Pennsylvania German ancestors arrived and settled here. They would have lived alongside of the indigenous people here, they would have been helped and helped them each other at times. I am very concerned about what is planned for the, I'm going to call it Nancy Horner House, because this is the history of it. My great-great-grandparents were Jacob Heisey Horner, born 1822, and Nancy Nee Brillinger Horner. They had 4 daughters. When Jacob died in 1901, Nancy, his widow, became the head of the family, and living arrangements were changing. She decided to build another house on their property at the former Headford Manse. Between these 2 houses were also a blacksmith shop and a greenhouse. This new house would give 3 of her daughters a place to have of their own, while the other sister and her family took over the family farm across the road on the 3rd concession, which is what was 99, 20, and 40 Leslie Street. I still reside on that farm property land, but my part is now 32 Love Court. And I still see the Nancy Horner house just a stone's throw across the road. I see its face every morning. I can look out my door right there and see it. I'm wondering if any of the committee has had a site visit to either of these places. You can answer that later, I guess. In the 1960s, there were discoveries of burials in the backyards along that cliff. And that's more than one property. We were told as kids it was the museum doing this. I guess it was archaeologists, but we got told it was the museum. As kids, we would find bones trickling and sliding down into the creek, coming from the high embankment. In the early 1970s, I found a body that was half eroded, half gone. I'm not sure how many European settlers or natives there were buried up there. Every year, ground is lost on that embankment. If you have a chance to look at it, I think you should. I wish someone had contacted me about the history of this property. The authors of the report could have asked at the Richmond Hills Historical Society or the library or just in town to reach a family member. They did not. I have offered assistance many times in this regard. Also, when I find that it is not a report requested by the city that we use, as in when we used to have Sue Murdoch do our reports on the committee, we had our own to go with. It just seems like a tainted happening to me. Anyways, back to the house. The house is currently showing stucco over the beautiful red brick that I remember as it was. There's a late 1960s dog kennel that was later added to it. I'm sure that that piece could be documented for history's sake. But I expect more respect for the widow Nancy's house regarding preservation. I believe it could be incorporated somehow, like other properties in the village have been. Documents and a plaque don't cut it for us. Again, I will say that I would be pleased to offer my assistance to the planning and planners involved, like I did before in 2020, to at least see what we could come up with. In 2020, we were told that this project was a rush, etc. And yet 3 years have passed and we heard nothing back. No resolution, and now talking demolition again. A question on the side I did have was, does Care First even have their license for the 120 facility beds? And in conclusion, I would just say little by little, we're losing our built history in Richmond Hill. Canada is a young country compared to others like Italy and so on. Those countries give their heritage time to steep, as in tea, so that it lives on. They value their heritage and are sensitive to the past. All this makes me wonder how much historical character will be left of Headford for the future, especially after all of Headford Mill buildings are gone, which the last one recently went not too long ago. I urge the committee to consider coming to an agreement on how to retain at least a portion of the front of the building to show it was there in a former life, in the very least. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Horner. I share your concerns and I thank you for joining us at this
Thank you.
meeting. Okay, next on the speakers list is Helen Liang, Care First Seniors and Community Services Association. And Helen, if you could help us understand whether or not Care First actually does have a license for this home to be built.
Sure. Thank you so much, Madam Chairman. I'm Helen Lang, and I'm the CEO of Care First Seniors and Community Services Association. Care First is a charity nonprofit service organization, having served the community of Greater Toronto Area, including York Region, City of Richmond Hill, City of Markham, since 1976. Today, join me is also our project manager, Mr. Mark Jones, from the director from Turner and Townsend. In 2005, Care First received a one-time grant, a capital grant from the city of Richmond Hill to purchase this property, 1 acre land on 9893 Leslie Street, where the Horner House, Nancy Horner House, is located. Since 2005, Care First has used this property to provide a slew of a continuum of community support services to support the seniors in the community. As identified by the York Region several reports about #1 reports in 2019, a forecast for long-term care beds and the implications for seniors housing the need in York Region. It reflects that in Richmond Hill alone, there is a serious shortage of long-term care beds. In 2018, the forecast is that by 2026, Richmond Hill itself, City of Richmond Hill itself, by 2026 will need over 1,000 long-term care beds. So Care First, with all these reports, and we also refer to Richmond Hill, the City of Richmond Hill Age-Friendly Community Needs Assessment 2022, that Richmond Hill would like to have something like what they call complete communities. What do we mean by complete communities? By the definition of the York Region definition is that to have campus of care. Campus of care is to have like something like seniors housing, medical services, assisted living options, long-term care home, on-site, and a range of lots of support services. And Richmond Hill also deemed complete communities like to have hub models, like having medical services, recreation program, community meeting space. And all this model of care can be scalable. So based on the needs, the community needs, the reports done by York Region itself, Care First Design want to make use of this small property, this land, to develop a campus of care. And we are really privileged that we have the support from the Ministry of Long-Term Care, that even the Deputy Minister of Long-Term Care came on site on July 7th to pay a site visit. They really like the integrated care model that Care First will be building a campus of care on this small piece of land. So the campus of care will include 124 long-term care beds, 36 units of assisted living, short stay overnight respite care for people living with dementia. We will have medical healthcare related services, a medical hub with primary healthcare, specialist care, specialist clinic, diagnostic service, dental office, chronic disease management service, and also pharmacy, laboratory services together. So in a nutshell, I would like to say this campus of care will increase the social infrastructure of the City of Richmond Hill. It enhances, supports seniors aging at home, provide community a place where the young and the old can meet to to really build up the vibrance of the city of Richmond Hill. The piece of land is small, and we need to remove this existing structure in order to allow the development of this campus of care. And we really would like to have the consultant has been working closely with the heritage staff to ensure that the Nancy Horner House is documented before its removal. And also we have the site plan approval, and CareFirst will definitely consult the staff to install commemorative plaque dedicated to the hamlet of Hereford and its role that it played in the development of this area. So we really would like to support the recommendations to remove this house from the heritage register so that it can be removed to be developed for this campus of care. And I would like the committee supports the staff recommendation, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Can you confirm for us whether CareFirst does have that license to operate?
So yes, we are basically working closely with the Ministry of Health for the development agreement, and currently is working both with the licensing department of the Ministry of Health to run this. It's parallel working currently for this.
So it's not in place at the moment, you're still awaiting it.
So basically, we have done everything. We have met all the requirements, submitted all the architectural planning and all the details and everything to the Ministry of Long-Term Care, and momentarily we are just to have the green light to move forward. Actually, they have set the green, say like one of the thing is the shovel on the ground ASAP.
Thank you, Ms. Liang. I appreciate that confirmation, or not so much, but thank you. At least that adds to our knowledge. Just before I welcome our third speaker, I'd like to also welcome Ward 2 Councillor Scott Thompson, who has joined. Welcome, Councillor Thompson. Okay, the next speaker that we have is Mr. Mark Jones. And Mr. Jones, you have the floor. If you could introduce yourself and let us know how you are affiliated with this project.
Thank you. My name is Mark Jones. I work for Turner and Townsend, and we are the project management firm working with CareFirst in supporting them with the approvals with the ministry and working with the design team. I have no more further comments to add. I think Helen's covered the major points, so I will hand back my time and then also available for any questions.
Okay, Mr. Jones, thank you so much. If I may ask you just one question directly before I move to the committee. Did your company in any way contact Ms. Horner for a discussion about its heritage?
No, no, we weren't involved in the production of the heritage report.
Okay, and do you know those who were involved with the production of the heritage report, SB, did they not contact any member of the Horner family? I'm
unsure. Maybe Helen's aware of that, but I'm unsure. It happened before we were engaged.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Jones. I appreciate that.
Okay.
It's unfortunate, especially in a situation like this. I understand and I know that our staff do an excellent job in informing anybody about the necessities, whether it be for a demolition or a new build, where an old site has had to be, an old built asset has had to be removed. But I really do decry the fact that Miss Joyce Horner or anybody from her family was not even contacted. I think that's shabby, to say the least. But let us continue. We now have in front of us scheduled business. 6.1. So, presentation by Julia Smith, who is our urban design heritage planner. And Julia is going to give us a presentation from the city's perspective of this particular site. Julia, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So good afternoon, everyone, members of the committee, Madam Chair. For those who may be joining us for the first time, my name is Julia Smith, and I'm the Heritage and Urban Design Planner at the City of Richmond Hill. First, before I get into my presentation, I just wanted to thank all of the delegates for, sharing their thoughts on this application and speaking before the committee today. Today, I'll be making a brief presentation related to the application to demolish a building that's listed on Richmond Hill's Heritage Register. This demolition application is addressed in Staff Report SRPBS 23002, which you have all had the opportunity to review and in advance of this meeting. Next slide, please. The property at 9893 Leslie Street is located on the east side of Leslie, just south of Major Mackenzie Drive East. And as has been mentioned by previous delegates, it's located within an area that was formerly known as the hamlet of Headford. And you can see the location of the property indicated in green in this aerial photograph. Next slide, please. The property contains a 2.5-story building that was built around 1909, known as the Horner House, which is listed as a non-designated property on the city's Heritage Register. The building has undergone significant alterations over time, both to its appearance and use, and is currently used as a facility for seniors, as was described in more detail by one of our delegates. It's also worth noting that a development application has been submitted for the subject property. And just to reiterate what Ms. Leung said, they are proposing to build a new higher density long-term care facility here with more than 120 new care beds for seniors, along with medical and active community center uses. So the owner of the property did submit a cultural heritage impact assessment. I'll be referring to this as a CHIA throughout my presentation just for brevity, as part of this original development application. And I did thoroughly review the report, and that report was also appended to my staff report that's before the committee today. Next slide, please. So staff are in agreement with the conclusions of the CHIA, which was prepared by Stevens Burgess Architects Limited, that the listed property at 9893 Leslie does not possess significant design, physical, historical, associative, or contextual value, and thus fails to meet the threshold for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So my staff report does go through the heritage evaluation of this property in quite a bit of detail. So I'll just provide a really kind of high-level summary of key points and considerations in this presentation. So in terms of design physical value, the property has undergone significant alterations over time, including the addition of a large 2-story side rear wing to the south, the addition of an enclosed front porch on the building's front elevation, the application of a stucco or a cementitious coating on the exterior of the building, which obscures its original red brick cladding, and also the removal of original architectural details such as window and door units and material finishes. As a result of all these unsympathetic changes, staff do concur with the CHIA's assessment that the subject property does not possess significant design or physical value. And just to go through the actual criteria, the provincial criteria that we have to consider when making this assessment, it's not considered a rare, unique, or early example of an architectural style, and the alterations to the exterior prevent the dwelling from being considered representative of the Edwardian four-square architectural style in which it was constructed. The house also does not exhibit a high degree of artistic merit, either in its craftsmanship or in its design. Next slide, please. In terms of historical associative value, the property may possess some minimal associative value in connection with the Horners, who, as Joyce Horner mentioned, were a prominent land-owning family who resided in Headford in the 19th and 20th centuries, and I guess still to the present, Joyce. However, in both reviewing the CHIA that was submitted and also some of my own independent research, there's an absence of historical evidence or documentation that would help to establish the strength of this house's connection with the Horner family more concretely. Further, the house was constructed around 1909 at a time when the hamlet of Headford was in the stages of decline. And so it's not considered significant in yielding information that contributes to an understanding of this area as a prosperous milling and agricultural community in the mid to late 19th century. So as a result, staff agree with the CHIA's assessment that the subject property possesses only minimal historical or associative value. Next slide, please. In terms of contextual value, the area surrounding the Horner House, again, formerly the hamlet of Headford, has been significantly altered due to the construction of contemporary residential subdivisions to the west, and more residential development happening to the northeast as well as newer institutional and industrial buildings to the north and south along the east side of Leslie Street. And again, I've shown the limits of the property in green here, and you can kind of see the context, the current context this property exists within. So whilst there is some remnant 19th century residential buildings that remain on Leslie Street, south of Major Mackenzie Drive East, these buildings really have a very cohesive kind of character, and they tend to represent the Ontario Gothic vernacular architectural style, which was prevalent in the mid to late 19th century. And just to describe this style, I realize I should have included some images here, but it's represented by houses that have much more modest footprints. They generally have a lower scale, 1.5 stories. They have steeply pitched gabled roofs with central dormers, and they usually have brick, stucco, or board and batten construction. So because this house was built at a later period, around 1909, and also because it has had subsequent significant alterations over the years, the subject property is not considered to define, maintain, or support the historic character of these remnant buildings on Leslie Street. As a result, staff also agree with the CHIA's assessment that the subject property does not possess significant contextual value as well. Next slide, please. So while staff do support the evaluation in the CHIA and agree that the property does not possess significant cultural heritage value or enough to warrant designation under the Ontario Heritage Act, the subject property does possess some minimal associative value in connection with the Horner family of Headford. So as a result of this, staff are requesting a number of additional submission requirements. So these are kind of requirements that would go above and beyond a typical application to demolish. And this is a way to mitigate any potential loss in cultural heritage value that may result from this demolition. And these additional requirements include, I believe Helen Leung also spoke to these a little bit, but I'll just reiterate. So we are asking for full building documentation of the Horner House prior to the demolition permit being approved. And this will consist of documentation photographs of both the exterior and interior, as well as found plan and elevation drawings. And we will also be asking for a commemorative strategy for the site, which will address themes such as the Horner family or the hamlet of Headford. And this will be required not as part of the demolition permit application, but as part of the site plan approval process for this site. So that's more of a planning applications type requirement. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff are recommending that Heritage Richmond Hill advise council that the subject property at 9893 Leslie Street does not merit designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that the property be removed from the Heritage Register, subject to the condition that the owner provide full building documentation prior to the issuance of a demolition permit. And just to note again here, that rather than being a condition of the demolition permit, the commemorative strategy that we're asking for will be a requirement of site plan approval. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I'm sure there will be many questions coming my way. So I am ready to answer them to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Julia. Greatly appreciate the presentation. Just one question before I open it to the floor. The Cultural Heritage Impact Assessment, which is before us, is submitted by the landowner, by the proponent. Do we ever, in any circumstance, do our own cultural heritage impact assessments in a situation such as this, or do we only accept the CHIA from the proponent?
So through the chair, so we do we always request CHIAs as part of a development application for a site that includes a heritage property, and then it's up to staff to kind of review the findings of the CHIA. So I do my own kind of assessment. I go through all the different criteria, all of the different provincial criteria for determining cultural heritage value or interest. And then, you know, if we agree with the findings of the CHIA, then we support the application, and if we don't, then we would actually have to go through a process of actually designating this property, because the only way to protect a property like this, if we find that it does have significant cultural heritage value, would be through designation under the Act.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I just wanted to
Does
make
that
sure
answer your
that,
question?
yes, it does.
Okay,
Julia, thank
great.
you. I just wanted to make sure that we that was put into the record, because I think it's very important because it was brought forward. Stephen, you want to add something?
Yeah, just if I could, Madam Chair, with submission of the CHIA, as Julia mentioned, we have an opportunity to review those. But if there's something we seek clarification on, or if there's something we want more information on, we do go back to the consultant who has prepared that, and we can ask for more information or clarification, or even so much as disagreement. So, you know, that's something that Julia does. We've certainly done that in the past. I know Pamela Vega has done that kind of thing when we needed something more. So it's not something we take at face value unless it's a very strong argument and we've looked at all the provincial criteria and it's an obvious one to support in terms of the development application. So there is some scrutiny exercised when we do review these things. Just thought I'd make that comment.
Looks like may have lost Councillor Silovitz.
Okay.
Hopefully she is back shortly. Oh, there she is. She's back. Oh, sorry, Councillor Silovitz, you are on mute.
Thank you. So I am. Thank you so much. Stephen, I think I got the gist of what you were saying. I probably missed the last little bits, but I appreciate that because it does help members of this committee, as well as members of the public, including Ms. Horner, to know that we have done our due diligence where this is concerned. And that becomes very, very important. The more heritage homes and heritage properties we lose going down this path. So I'm going to now open it up to committee. I see Councillor Davidson put up her hand first. Councillor Davidson, would you like to move this forward so it's on the floor and we can have discussion? Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Davidson. You have the floor, 5 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you to all the delegates and thank you to staff. So just to clarify, this is my first round on being on this committee. The consultant is hired by the applicant through you, Madam Chair?
That is correct.
And this question for staff, has there ever been a consultant who didn't think tearing down a historical building was a good idea? Like, what are some of the options here besides tearing down based on what consultants in the past have ever found? Or is it always, it feels like a little bit like the deck is stacked in favor of.
Fair enough question. Let's pass Stephen or
when they're the ones assessing whether, yeah.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I could respond to that. Yeah, so I do know about this quite a bit because I actually did used to work for a large heritage consulting firm. So I would say that the consultants that actually did take on this project are very well known in the field, and they do very good, thorough work. It's Stevens Burgess Architects. Of course, I would say that there is an incentive because they are hired by the owner to perhaps favor certain actions, but to be honest, in reviewing this report, I really do feel confident with what they've put forward in terms of an assessment. And so I know that there has been talk in other municipalities of potentially doing like a peer review process for HIAs that come in, and that is certainly something that could potentially happen in the future. But our current process is that we receive these CHIAs. We review them ourselves. If we have questions or concerns, it really is a matter of, our professional review and opinion to either agree with the findings or not. And if we don't agree with the findings of a report, then it is well within our capability to recommend designation of a property. But in this case, that is not what I would do.
Thank you, Julia. Sorry, Councillor Davidson, just one moment. I've turned my camera off simply because my signal seems to be going in and out and in and out. And I think sometimes when you do turn the camera off, it does help. So here's hoping. I am still here. Go ahead, Councillor Davidson.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Also, I have a question for staff. The way I read the agenda, we're removing this from, this is already designated heritage property we're removing, is that correct? No, it was on the list to be considered a heritage property.
Through the chair. So this is a listed property, which means that it's not designated. So to my knowledge, like when a property is listed, it just means that it's of interest, that it's of potential cultural heritage value, but that value really needs to be investigated further. So when we request and review a CHIA, that's what we're doing, is we're doing this kind of additional investigation into the property to see if we think that, that a designation of the property would be supportable. So the request is to remove the property from the register. So when the property is removed from the register, then the applicant is able to apply for a building permit, a demolition permit to demo the building.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, are we taking it off the list in part because the new Ford government guidelines of what can qualify as heritage or not? I feel, I think one of our first meetings said that it's a much higher bar now. Is that one of the reasons why staff recommends the demolition?
Through the chair. So that was definitely a consideration here. So what you're talking about, Councillor Davidson, is that with Bill 23, we received a new set of prescribed criteria to do our heritage evaluations through. And now we have to meet 2 of the criteria for it to be considered a candidate for designation. So that certainly factored into my review and my decision. I will also say that because I am undergoing this process right now, we're reviewing all of the properties that the city currently has on its heritage register and screening them to see which ones we may want to consider designating before the timeline of the end of 2024 is up for designations, which was also resulting from Bill 23. I do have a very good sense of the properties that are priorities for designations and those that are not. And I would say that there are other properties in Richmond Hill that I think we should be focusing our efforts on in terms of being of really significant cultural heritage value.
Thanks,
Thank
Julia.
you. And through you, Madam Chair, for the planner of the project, is there anything in this building that could be incorporated into the new seniors home? I haven't been through the building. Is there a fireplace? Is there some kind of carved piece of wood? Is there anything that you could consider incorporating in the new building? And if I heard correctly, the city of Richmond Hill actually provided a grant for the purchase of this property to provide much needed seniors housing. But in light of that, could you consider making more, real effort to incorporate some of this Richmond Hill history in the structure, in your new building, in your new process? I'm not an architect. You would know better than me what translates, a door, a post, whatever. But is that been considered, and could it be considered?
Mr. Jones? Do we still have Mr. Jones with us? There he is, Mr. Jones.
Through the chair, we've done a detailed video and photographic survey of the existing building. I think, speaking for Care First, I think we're more than happy to work with staff to look at those options. Again, I'm not an architect either, but I think staff are more than happy to work with, or Care First are more than happy to work with staff to come up with a way to integrate elements if staff feel there is something within the space that can be or should be integrated. So I think it's a yes to working with staff to do that if staff think there is something there that we should consider.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Councillor?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I was thinking even along the lines of having, you know, some floorboards, some roof beams, something that has so you know what was here before this was we're only here because people like this family started here, and I also think, considering your clientele, which is seniors, they might really appreciate that aspect of where they're living. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Davidson. Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Much appreciated. Next speaker on the list is Committee Member Bob Berube. Bob, you have the floor. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the chair, my question is for staff and maybe the property owner or eventual architect, I guess, for this project. In terms of mitigation strategy, have we considered asking that, I think as Mrs. Horner actually alluded to, is incorporating part of the facade, part of the elements of the building into design of the new facility when it should go up. You know, I think examples that already exist across Richmond Hill. I think the former Richmond Hill High School on Wright Street, which is now École Normale Morisseau, the original building parts of that are incorporated into the new construction. Other examples we would have is, I'll give an example from Toronto at the Royal Canadian Military Institute, where a new condo building has gone up, but the original facade was taken pictures of and restored or replicated to its original glory. Or even more recently here in Richmond Hill, where a property owner asked for a heritage building permit to, rather than destroy the house, actually restored the facade back to its original state and then expanded upon the property in the back to create a future home that meets modern requirements, but then brings back the former heritage elements, etc., rather than simply outright destroy, or at least in the design, replicate elements of what that building would have looked like in its original construction. So I would like to see that as part of, where possible, as part of our requirements for presentation, part of the building permit or the design in the future.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Jones, can you comment on that at all? Is any consideration being given to maintaining any part of the facade or interior of this house?
Currently, in the current plans, there is no retention of the existing building. I think for the committee's sort of information, the program for long-term care is obviously mandated by the province. It's very specific in terms of what needs to fit on a floor plate, and it's the number of resident beds and the program that sits there. I think as Keir first mentioned, the site is relatively small, and we are dealing with environmental on one side of the site and a setback on Leslie. So therefore, the site that typically was small to start with is now even smaller, and it has presented a significant challenge but opportunity for Care First to demonstrate that long-term care can be delivered in an urban setting. You know, I think maybe some of members have seen long-term care in other locations, and they generally are low-rise, spread out on large sites, and this is clearly not one of those sites. So therefore, the program itself, as mandated by the ministry, makes it difficult, if not impossible, to actually retain the existing building that's on the site.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. And perhaps some effort could be made into duplicating some parts of this house that originally stood in its architectural design. And I'm sure that urban design will go through that with you as well. But next person on my list is Committee Member Agnes Parr. Go ahead, Agnes.
First of all, I would like to thank the staff and the people who worked on the reports. I have read all the documents through, and I do have to say that something like this, I'm very, very concerned about demolishing a house outright. That house, I did take it upon myself to go over to the property and look at it from the outside. It has character. Yes, it was built in a previous time period. It is a part of this town, and it's sad to see that this is the type of thing and the slippery slope that we may be on, and things will be just being gradually chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. I have a problem with regards to the report, because to me it's sort of all one-sided. And I think that some of the questions, for example, creating a more of an associative value with it, if Joyce Horner had been consulted with, I think she probably would have and could have provided further information with regards to all of that aspect. And so I'm very concerned about this, because hearing what she had to say, that changes the way I think about things. Important information has been missed. And it's very valuable information that she is stating. And I think that she should have been consulted with, and moving forward, there should be some way of talking to her and incorporating what she's saying. I also want to see that somehow, in some way, shape, or form, that this house is preserved. They may have come to this conclusion in this CHIA that no, it's not worth this or that, but I want to see some sort of preservation. In some way, shape, or form, we should be able to do something, because I'm not in agreement with moving forward with an out and outright demolition and then it's gone. I want to see some form of preservation.
Okay, Agnes, thank you. Julia, would you like to comment on that? I know that what you had said before about while we don't do, the city doesn't undertake its own cultural heritage impact assessments, we do, as through you and through the department, we do look at the cultural heritage impact assessment that is before us. And you, as our professional, look at it and decide whether or not it is it's germane or it goes against certain legislated issues. So, if you could comment on that a bit, please.
Yeah, through the chair. Unfortunately, the way that the Ontario Heritage Act works is that the only way, so if it's a listed property, the only thing that a property owner has to do is give 60 days notice of an intention to demolish a property. So the only way to protect a property after that is to designate it. Or to include, additional measures into the demo permit or the site plan application, for example, in this case. But that would be more of like a commemoration strategy as opposed to preservation. So if we wanted to conserve a portion of this building, say like the front facade or a portion of it in some way, we would have to designate this property under the Ontario Heritage Act. And I just, it's my professional opinion in reviewing the CHIA that I don't think that a designation would be supportable.
Thank you. And not to interrupt, but that your professional opinion then would be in line with provincial boards, right? The Conservation Review Board or the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Yes, exactly. So that, the OLT. There is a likelihood, just, given we do exist in a very kind of litigious planning system currently. And so, if we were to move forward with the designation and the designation were to be appealed, then it's my professional opinion that I don't think that it would be that strong. We wouldn't have that strong of an argument here if this designation were to be appealed.
I agree. Thank you, Julia. Stephen, would you like to add?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to bring to light, I think what Julia has said in her analysis is an issue of integrity, and much of the integrity of this building has been lost by virtue of the changes and alterations to its exterior cladding system, which is an important consideration in moving ahead with a designation. If the integrity has been lost or significantly altered in a building, then there's not much there left in terms of historic fabric. And even in terms of what's been applied there today may have really damaged the building by virtue of its application to the exterior. So I think this is an important part of Julia's analysis, is the issue of integrity. And when she says that she couldn't support a designation, it's for that very reason that relates to integrity. And that's an important provincial objective and criteria when we're thinking about designations.
Yeah, I agree, Stephen. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, the extra comment there. Agnes, do you have anything further to add?
I just want to ask that why did no one consult with Joyce Horner? If either side can answer that, because based on what she said, it definitely seems that she could have provided a lot more information, certainly in terms of associated value.
Okay, so I know that we have spoken with her. I know that Julia has spoken with Ms. Horner. Julia, if you want to comment, please, and then we can go back to Mr. Jones, but he's already given us the answer to that.
Yeah, through the chair. I will say this is a little bit of an interesting situation because the planning application for this came in 2020. That's when the CHIA was written. So consultation really with Joyce Horner should have happened at that point. Like it should have happened through the heritage consultant. It should have happened, if it were to happen, then through staff, going through the report and seeing holes in it and consulting at that point. So I unfortunately I can't answer why why that didn't happen, but certainly it's a very good point moving forward that when we are reviewing our HIAs or CHIAs, we do need to make sure that if there are key stakeholders in the community that would have that kind of knowledge and insight into the more historical associative value, that those are consulted. And so definitely noted on my part, and I will be making sure to scrutinize reports that come forward to make sure that kind of consultation has happened.
So that being said, then there's a valuable piece of valuable information that's actually missing from these reports. Because it bothers me that she when she spoke, she provided very, very additional valuable information, but we only have the reports in front of us that, while yes, they're very thorough, I don't deny that these people didn't go and do their homework, but how important piece of information is missing from that? That's my point.
Is that a question?
It's a comment to it.
It's a comment. Okay. Thanks, Agnes. No, I don't disagree with you. There is comprehensive historical information contained within the report and the assessment. So that is there, but it is the personal touch that Joyce offers because she is a living ancestor of the Horner family. And I think it would behoove everybody to ensure that they do whatever they can to contact any living ancestors in order to glean the best information possible with regards to any kind of associative information that might be relevant. But I understand exactly what Julia is saying and Stephen, and we are in a very unfortunate situation at the moment. And as Councillor Davidson reflected for Bill 23, it's not only in our planning issues, but it comes to heritage as well. And this perhaps might be one of those where they have gone down from identify 4 to identify 2, and only one of the 2 must be noted. So it's become very difficult for us, as I'm sure you appreciate, Agnes. But
yeah, I agree with you on that. Those thoughts did absolutely cross my mind. But I'll pass now for the rest of it and wait for a second round because I can see that other people have their hands up.
Okay, Agnes, we will come back to you. Not a problem. On the first round still, we have next hand up is Committee Member Diane McLeod. You have the floor, Diane, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, my question is regarding something that Joyce Horner mentioned during her comments and that is that there is a burial site at the back of the property where remains are actually eroding into the creek. I wanted to know what kind of archaeological assessment has been done. Are there any plans to deal with the burials and the remains that are there?
That's a great question, Diane. Thank you. Let's go to Julia or Stephen on that, please.
Through the chair, I can try to answer that. So to my knowledge, there's no kind of like formal documentation of this site being a burial site. So I mean, and if there were archaeological assessments required and requested, that would have happened as part of the original planning application. We don't really ask for archaeological assessments to do with, you know, heritage permits. Typically, that's more of like a planning matter that would be dealt with through the planning process.
Understood. Sorry, one moment, Diane. Mr. Jones, if I may pose this to you, can you shed any light on that? Why there was no archaeological assessment done of this property? Were First Nations invited to take a look at the property and give their input?
I say back from 2020, Chair. I think it's difficult to assess exactly what specifically occurred. I think as Julia stated, there's been no indication of any burial or a need for an archaeological investigation on the site. It's not information that was deemed relevant when we did our PPR with planning, and it's not something that has been raised or highlighted in the recent future.
Were First Nations in any way consulted?
I can't answer that.
Okay, thank you. I understand you're working at a bit of a disadvantage here because of the date. So I do appreciate your input, Mr. Jones. But Diane, do you have anything further?
More to the point that I would just think that there should be some kind of investigation done to see whether or not there are still burials there. And then the proper processes be put into place with the government and the Cemeteries Act and all of that lovely stuff that goes on with undocumented burials.
Thank you, Diane. Excellent point. Is that all?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I don't see any other hands raised for the first round. So if I may, I'm going to try and turn my camera on just for a few minutes. If I freeze again, I'll just turn it off. Okay. So I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank staff for this comprehensive report. And I want to thank the delegates who spoke. And I want to thank our committee members for their impassioned input here. I know Ms. Joyce Horner personally, so I need to put that on the table. I know very well this land and the land on the northwest corner as well. And I decry the manner in which, not only with the Horner lands, that we have lost the integrity of what came before. Yes, we have saved the Cyrus Mapes house and the Jacob Horner house on the northwest corner. Thank God, not without a lot of problems, but they were saved and they are now integrated into that new subdivision. So at least we have that. But with the demolition of this property at 9893, we just see another part of this city's heritage with regards to colonialism being chipped and chipped and chipped away. And as was stated before, the legislative constraints that we have with regards to Bill 23 and the Ontario Heritage Act, it's very, very difficult for us as a committee to deny staff's recommendations and then we would have to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And because staff is saying that it should be removed and there should be a demolition permit here, this committee, this city would then have to go to outside help, because we would have to find outside consultants and lawyers in order for us to have a seat at the Ontario Land Tribunal. And given what I know about the Ontario Land Tribunal, and given what we know, as much as we do know, Bill 23, it's obvious to me, as the chair and as a member of this committee and as a member of council for the past 9 years, that it is most likely, given the situation and given the professional opinion of Julia Smith as well and her department, that the OLT would agree to this. So I believe our opinions are very important, but I believe also that our hands are tied, and our hands are tied by legislative rope. And we have this over and over and over again. Heritage now becomes the same problem. So I just wanted to put that up front. What I would like to say is this, and I'll also go to a second round if I go past my time, which I may. As Joyce Horner said, there's a very rich history that is associated with the Horner family in this particular section of Richmond Hill and Headford. So what I would like to see, and I know that in the Julia has made the comments about the plaque, and I know that Ms. Young said that as well. And while I agree with Ms. Horner that putting a plaque up has very little significance for their family and their own personal history, and perhaps the history of Richmond Hill, at least it's something that we can do. What I would like to ask, or put on the public record, please, is that the red brick from the exterior be saved and used perhaps as a pathway, to make pathway leading to or leading from the home. I would also like to see the fieldstone foundation stones saved as much as possible, and perhaps that fieldstone can be used as the base or the pediment, a pedestal, onto which a plaque could be placed. And that plaque in itself, not only noting the Horner family's history and the history of the carrying trail and colonialism and all of that, but also the fact that there are certain items that are contained within this new build that came from the original heritage site. So I would like that put on the public record, please, and I would hope that that the proponent is willing to do that, because I do believe that it would be very, very important. So I'll stop there. I do have I'll go on for a second round, but I do have members of committee who want to go on a second round as well. Councillor Davidson, I saw your hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Is there any hope of saving some of the old trees that are on the lot, which I'm sure your new clients would also appreciate, rather than mowing down old oak trees and anything else that was probably a sapling when this house was built? Is there a way to take care and not just mow down every old tree that's on this property? Through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Julia, do we know anything about the landscaping plans? Because I know that would be separate from us. That is part of a site plan of subdivision and site plan. So do we know, is there anything that we know as yet, whether or not any of the trees are going to be preserved, or is it just a general cut down?
Through the chair, I mean, my review really was focusing on the building and the cultural heritage value of the building. As to the removal of trees on site, I am actually not aware what is going on with that. I would assume that perhaps, I think Mark Jones just put his hand up, so maybe he can respond to that better than me.
Thank you. I'm going to go with camera just for a minute, Mr. Jones. Just one moment, please.
Okay.
Okay, yes, thank you. Mr. Jones, can you add to that? Because natural heritage is, I know, is a part of another planning process completely.
Yes, it is. We have provided a full survey of all the trees on the property. The intent is not to remove all of the trees. Some of the trees are actually dead and they will be removed. But we have provided a plan, and there are trees that we are keeping and we will protect on the lot.
Thank you. That's very good to know. Appreciate that. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I do just want to say to the planners and Ms. Young, I think what we're asking you here is exactly what's going to be asked at council. So if you incorporate some of these ideas of maintaining some heritage, I think obviously the structure and long-term beds is welcome in our community, but I'll be asking the same things at council. So I hope you'll heed some of the things this committee has to say. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Davidson. I completely agree with you. And I would have the same questions as well. So I would hope that from this committee meeting, the proponents are very aware of the comments that have been made here. And when they do present this to committee of the whole or council, it is presented in an amended fashion so that we know exactly what it is that can actually be saved from this particular built asset. Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Okay, second round, Committee Member Agnes Parr, go ahead.
Okay, through you, Madam Chair, I want to pick up on what Diane said earlier. We've been made aware at this meeting by Joyce Horner about there being a burial site there. What are the possibilities of an archaeological assessment being done?
Is that question to Julia?
To whomever can answer that question, because if it turns out that there is a burial site there, it would be very horrifying to find that digging would start and, you come across a burial site and no archaeological assessment is, done, at least a stage 1 assessment to rule in or out any possibility of this.
Okay, thank you, Agnes. I agree. Stephen, your hand is up.
Yes, through the chair, Agnes, I think your point is well taken. And what I'd like to do is take that request back and have a conversation with my colleagues in management and development planning and see what the possibilities are through process and see if there's something we can do to address the archaeology question. I think it's a valid point, and I think we'll take that back and have a bit of an exploratory conversation with them. Leave that with us.
Okay,
thanks, Stephen. I appreciate that, because us at council, as Councillor Davidson knows, and Councillor Thompson, who's joining us as well, but not a member of the committee, when it does come back to council, these are all issues that we can address. And the planning staff, planning department, make sure that they are involved in this as well. Thank you, Stephen. Agnes?
Yes, I would just like to reiterate what you had said, Karen. I would like to see as much of the heritage of this house preserved as possible, incorporating in ways that you can. So, for example, she mentioned the red brick, but whatever you can do to incorporate as much of its heritage and reflecting that the Horner family were a big part of the Hedford village there. And then I just have one other quick point. So when we come to voting on this, can we vote on this with regards to amendment? Maybe Councillor Silowitz can explain that, or somebody can explain that, because we've had all these points come up, and this is actually my first time with this as well. And I'm not in favor of an outright demolition there and there, but can we sort of vote with these? Can someone explain that to me? Thank you.
Thanks, Agnes. I appreciate that. I'd actually also had that discussion with staff and with Ryan Brand. Mr. Brand, can you help us with this, please, from a process and procedure perspective?
Sure. Through the chair, Committee Member Parr, if I understand what you're asking, you're looking to see if we can vote, or perhaps it's to make an amendment to the recommendation that is presented to council. Certainly an amendment can be moved, for instance, if you wanted to specifically add in, I'm going to say additional conditions
Yes.
or things of that nature. Certainly, if you let me know, I can certainly craft that for you. And we can move that as an amendment either to add in, whatever it is that you would like to see in there. I will present some things to staff as Ms. Smith has stated. Some of the conditions that are in the staff report and things like that may come elsewhere. But I will state that ultimately the Heritage Richmond Hill is an advisory committee to council, and council will make the final decision. So however it goes, it's what Heritage Richmond Hill is advising to council.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that. So
Thank you.
the short answer, Agnes, is yes, an amendment can be made. I can't make that. I'm the chair. Must come from a member of committee. If someone does want to do that, we could make it as be inserted as B2 in what is already before us. But that's, if somebody wants to put that forward, and then the committee will have to vote on that as well. So Agnes, I hope that answered your question.
It does answer my question. That is what I would like to see, because I would like the amendment to reflect, in a general sense, the points that we discussed this afternoon, the preservation of the heritage in some way, shape, or form, as much as we can, and the point about the burial sites with the archaeology point there.
Okay, thank you. So we have an amendment which now takes the floor. I'll let our deputy clerk lead us on that. Ryan, do you need some time to construct?
Thank you. Through the chair, just if I probably need a bit of guidance here. So from what I've heard, there are things such as an archaeological study to be conducted. That is one thing that I've heard.
First Nations should be consulted.
Yes.
Okay, I've heard some things regarding trees, although at the same time I also heard that perhaps some of the trees are not alive, or or would be removed anyway. So I will craft, but if you have some main points for me to add, so archaeological study, consultation with First Nations. Is there anything else that I'm missing? I mean, I have heard things like the commemorative plaque. I have heard things about, the red brick underneath the stucco to be used as a path. So it's up to committee member Parr to let me know what you'd like to see, and certainly that can be added as an amendment to the main motion.
Okay, I think. Go ahead.
Agnes, sorry, excuse me.
Go ahead.
So
Yeah.
what we do is, if you wish to include that in your amendment, and because we're at committee, we don't need a second here, it's just simply an amendment through one committee member, we can add that the original red brick of the built asset be I don't know what's conserved, so
Conserved,
that
incorporated, conserved in some way.
Right.
I think when you were speaking, you mentioned a number of different things, and I'm in agreement with what you had said. So that pretty much encapsulated a lot of what could be potentially preserved, and
Thank you.
certainly something to reflect the Horner family,
Yes.
and perhaps as they are when they do this build, maybe in a reception area, somehow reflecting the history of the area as well, and of the house.
Okay.
So it's quite general what I'm saying, but anything and any components of the house that perhaps they might even, when they're taking things down, they might come across things underneath that have historical value, because that's something that they couldn't tell for certain in the report if things are covered over. So you pretty much, when you were speaking before, you encapsulated things. You mentioned that red brick wall. There was something else that you mentioned. So that's that stuff.
Yeah,
As best as we can.
Foundation, because that's original. That's from the 1800s.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we'll leave that with Ryan. He'll construct that. I see. While Ryan is doing that, we have an amendment on the floor here. So what we are discussing now is the amendment. I know it's not in front of us but we kind of know what's going to be said. So Diane, I saw you put your hand up first, and then I'll go to Councillor Davidson to speak to the amendment.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, for Ryan. It's the funeral, pursuant to the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act 2002, sections 94, 95, and 96 are what have to be adhered to with burial sites.
Thank you. Was that it?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Councillor Davidson?
Thank you.
Okay, we have something.
I'm interested through you, Madam Chair, who would do the archaeological study? Who would be paying for that? Who would be doing it? Who would offer the timeline on that? Through you,
Well,
Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. As far as I know, it would be done, it would have to be undertaken by the proponent. Julia or Stephen, can you comment, please?
Through the chair, that would be something that would have to be undertaken by the applicant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
because they
thank
would have
you.
to hire a professional archaeological consultant who would be doing that.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, the fourth part there, I don't think I can, I'm for exploring maintaining some of this building, definitely the parts about the former burial grounds, but I don't think we should have in a motion what we want them to do with the brick. I think it has to be much more general, because it's not, forgive me, it's not the job of the committee to suggest how these things would be done, and because we don't know what the bigger plan is or what the design is. So I would urge us to do something much more general about incorporating the red brick or any other part that they think is of heritage and could be incorporated in the new building.
Yes, I agree with you.
It's not written that way, though. It's just listing an example of some of the things, but we're not actually telling them how to do it. It just says that the original red brick build asset be conserved in some way.
That should
Okay,
be
the path part then could come. So that and the foundations that you mentioned,
the fieldstone foundation,
the fieldstone foundations and
foundation brick. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, so that the original red brick be assessed to be conserved in some way. I feel like it needs to be couched with, this isn't like we want them to do this, we want them to follow this and show us how they can do that, rather than a straight up demand.
We don't need to go ahead.
Excuse me. I just don't see this kind of thing being approved by council necessarily, because it's just very specific and it needs to be, I mean, you tell me, Karen, through you, Madam Chair. I just feel it needs to be broad of what we're looking for rather than specific.
No, you're correct, Councillor Davidson. I agree with you. It must be broad, because remember again, and as Ryan said to us, we make recommendations to council. It is council that makes the final decision. So I think whatever is written with, and hopefully Agnes will approve, because she's the mover of this amendment, that if it's written in such a way that it is as broad-based as possible. Do you agree with that, Councillor Davidson?
I do. I think that's the kind of thing that has the best chance of being passed by council. Those are my only comments. Oh, and I do want to say about the trees, I do feel that the trees are important, but I think I heard that is the goal of the planner as well. We need to include that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and again, it's natural heritage, so it will be considered again when we come to site planning. So if I could have all, Timothy, I'll get to you in just one moment. If I could have all members read the amendment in front of us, and especially the mover. Let me know, just put up your hands if you think any words should be changed. And I will do the same. Timothy, you to go.
Yeah, my comment is about the amendment. I think one of the issue may be in all this is there's some we haven't done enough, I guess, consultation with all the stakeholders concerned. So I would make it more general, the consultation part, other than just to go to First Nations, but also include all the unidentified maybe stakeholders, right, including the Horner family, like Joyce Horner, I think we haven't mentioned.
The living
Maybe they would
ancestors.
be able
living
to
members, yes.
point us to more, yeah. Sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Timothy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying is there may be other stakeholders as a general clause that we need to consult further, like the Horner family or Joyce Horner, in addition to First Nation and other maybe unidentified stakeholder as we did more investigation into this.
I thank you, Timothy. That's a good point. I think also the Richmond Hill Historical Society would be considered a stakeholder here. So there's that
Yes,
as
we
well.
are.
So Ryan, I don't want this to become too involved, because again, we don't like to make amendments or recommendations on the fly without having consulted fully with our staff. However, I do believe that this particular amendment has a place. And when it comes to council, I believe that it should be discussed as is, and that's something that I know that Councillor Davidson agreed with as well. So Ryan, can you help me with something? In point number 3, that First Nations be consulted in regards to this site as a burial site, that's incorrect, if I may. First Nations be consulted, and any other stakeholders be consulted. And I think that's broad enough for us to include the Horner family, the living ancestors, as well as the Richmond Hill Historical Society. What do you think, Ryan?
I think you, through the chair, I've made perhaps some more general adjustments. Perhaps this may work. I'm going to say better, but let me show you what I've got here. So, in terms of adjusting it, so perhaps more general. So, then an archaeological study be conducted on the site, that First Nations and any other stakeholders be consulted. And we've talked about the red brick, and we've talked about the fieldstone, but I say that any heritage elements be considered for potential incorporation. I actually should say into
the new build.
Yeah, new build where feasible. So that could be anything. It may not just be the red brick. Perhaps when they uncover more things, perhaps other things come up.
Yeah,
but
it could be, yeah.
I think this incorporates the field stones and the red brick. And if this works for committee member Parr, then certainly we can put it to a vote. But I think this covers, in more general terms, what committee has discussed today.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryan. Agnes, are you comfortable with what is written?
I am comfortable with that. I like the fact that you have changed that to reflect more generically heritage elements. I will say, Karen, I do agree with you. I take your advice on the fact as to how council will look at things, because you have many years of experience with that. And I wouldn't want it that we would spend time, doing things and making specifics, and then it has to all be, it's not going to be approved in that. So I'm good with that. And yes, generically heritage elements covers a whole broad spectrum of things.
Thank you, Agnes. I appreciate that. Councillor Davidson, may I ask you, as the other committee member who is a member of council, are you okay with the Parr amendment?
Yes, and I like that we we removed the specific citation of burial ground, just in case there's something other of significance. It's good to keep it broad, and that way we can't anticipate what they might find when we look a little closer in terms of the archaeological part. So yes, I appreciate the member making this motion, and I appreciate us honing it down to something that I think council can support.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Okay, so we have on the floor an amendment by committee member Agnes Parr that the following clauses be added to section B. 2, that an archaeological study be conducted on the site. 3, that First Nations and any other stakeholders be consulted. And 4, that heritage elements be considered for potential incorporation into the new build where feasible. So if I could have, Ryan, if you could take that off the screen so I can see all my people, thank you. Okay, so we're going to put that to the vote. All those in favor of the amendment on the floor, please raise your hands. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so now let Ryan include that into the into the recommendations, and then we will have that in front of us. So does anybody else wish to speak? Some members of committee did not speak on the first round or even the second round. Just show me your hands if you wish to speak, continue to speak on the second round, because that's what we were on with regards to the original recommendations. No, we good? We clear? Okay. Okay, so if I may, just to sum up, thank you, Agnes. I appreciate you putting that amendment forward. I believe it's very important, and I believe it'll lead council in the right way. I definitely would hope, and through this amendment, that Joyce Horner and any other member of her family who are living ancestors of the original Horners be consulted just to get information about what the meaning of this site actually is and how that can be incorporated somehow into whatever is eventually done, or how Care First can actually include that as well. So thank you for that. I'm just going through my notes here. Yeah, I think I've covered everything. So I want to thank all members of committee for their important comments here. Each one is very, very valid, and I'm pleased that we got an amendment out of that, which seems to cover the broad aspect of this much, much better. So I would like to see the full recommendation on the floor, thank you, as amended and moved by Councillor Davidson. So this is what is in front of us. I'll read it out for the public record. Actually, Ryan, could I ask you to read it out, because part of it is blocked by my gallery.
Absolutely. Thank you. Through the chair, the main motion as amended, moved by Councillor Davidson and amended by Committee Member Parr, that Heritage Richmond Hill recommends to Council A, that the Horner House located at 9893 Leslie Street does not merit cultural heritage designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and B, that 9893 Leslie Street be removed from Richmond Hill's Heritage Register, subject to the following conditions. Clause A, that prior to the issuance of any permit for the subject property, including a building permit or a permit related to the demolition, shoring, and excavation of the subject property, the owner shall submit building documentation for the Horner House, including documentation, photographs of the interior and exterior, and as-built measured plan and elevation drawings to the satisfaction of Heritage and Urban Design staff. Clause 2, that an archaeological study be conducted on the site. Clause 3, that First Nations and any other stakeholders be consulted. And clause 4, that heritage elements be considered for potential incorporation into the new build where feasible.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Okay, so if all members of committee are satisfied with what is in front of us, please raise your hand if you're not. Otherwise, I can get back to my full gallery. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so all members of committee, you are satisfied. I see one hand. Timothy, go ahead. That is before us now. Is there anything you want to add? Unmute yourself, Timothy.
No, actually, I'm just raising my hand to the whole course.
Okay, good enough. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 6.1 before us, and all those committee members, please raise your hands. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Anybody opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Ms. Horner, for coming in to speak with us. Your comments were invaluable. And to Mr. Jones and Ms. Liang, thank you very much for speaking with us here this afternoon. We appreciate and respect everything that you had to say. And I believe that our concerns about the Horner family not being consulted are at least collected into this amendment, which will go to council, and hopefully council will agree with this committee and take its recommendations. So again, my thanks. So moving on next to our agenda item 6.2. So agenda item 6.2 is the Heritage Designation Subcommittee is to give us a verbal update on progress of the Heritage Designation focus groups for the village core. This will be a 10-minute update. I don't see a name here as to who's giving that update. Can you please let me know who's doing it? Bob Berube, is it you? Bob, thank you.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, you have 10 minutes and we look forward to your update.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for this committee, on behalf of the Heritage Designated Subcommittee that was formed prior to the summer months, including staff led by Julia Smith, we formed a subcommittee in order to look at the participating in two so far facilitated focus groups with heritage and urban design staff this past June. So these two sessions were focused on listed properties in Richmond Hill in the village core. The objective of these two focus groups was to provide community-based information and insight and value on the value and vulnerability of the pre-screened listed heritage property to the staff. Not to make decisions on whether or not these properties should be designated, but to provide background information and more depth to the historical significance as we were able to find through our own research. So in preparation for these focus groups, staff developed a pre-screening criteria of all the listed properties in Richmond Hill, using a criteria to narrow down the list of non-designated heritage properties for consideration and discussion. This also helps staff achieve, hopefully this will help staff achieve their goal to identifying 27 to 35 properties to seek designation before the end of 2024. So the pre-screening criteria for those who are interested included the design value of the property, the integrity of the building itself and its original architectural integrity, the contextual value of the property within the community, etc., and risk and vulnerability of that property from development, etc. So based on those four criteria, the staff presented the listed properties in different categories. These are category A buildings, B, and C, and I'll just give a little more flavor to what those mean. The 17 buildings were placed into category A, which is those are recommended for potential designation.
My apologies. Just we have an issue with quorum. We do require 7 committee members. I do realize that one of the committee members has dropped. So my apologies. We have quorum again. Please continue.
Oh, thank you very much. So I'll just kind of maybe backtrack to the pre-screening criteria that was listed. So again, those were designated design value, the integrity of the property, contextual value, and the risk and vulnerability. Applying the pre-screening criteria that I just mentioned, the staff were able to divide the village core and the listed properties into 3 categories, 17 of which were placed into category A buildings, which those are recommended for potential designation. 21 category B buildings, which were pending for discussion, which the subcommittee discussed in great detail. The remaining 138 buildings, those fell to category C, which were not recommended for potential designation and not reviewed by the subcommittee during these 2 focus groups. Because we were focused on 2 village core locations, We looked at presenting any research that we were able to collect through archival research, conversations with local historians, site visits. So the subcommittee members took it upon themselves to visit the sites where possible and do a lot of extensive research on the side. Discussions about the value and vulnerability of screen properties as presented to us by staff, and continue to communicate outside of these facilitated discussions to the staff over the summer to provide additional information as it became available, using all our resources at our disposal, including visits to the library and I believe numerous conversations within the Richmond Hill Historical Society itself. Information that provided has helped inform the staff's assessment of which properties may be eligible for designation, which is still pending the end of our work, which will be continued next week on September 27th, where properties of the city's historical hamlets, including Headford, Jefferson, Oak Ridges, Temperanceville, would also be up for discussion to review those properties, at which time staff will guide us through the end process of the subcommittee's work. So barring any questions, that's my verbal report to this committee, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. For the record, can you tell us who the members of the subcommittee are, please?
So, Madam Chair, so myself on the subcommittee, Agnes Parr, and Barbara, I will get your name wrong.
Demambro.
Demambro. And unfortunately, I'm missing one name, so I'm maybe relying on the other two members that I just mentioned, or Julia, to fill the gap. There's one more member that I'm missing.
It's Barbara. It's the other Barbara.
It's the other
Right.
Barbara.
Yes.
Right, and she's not here. She's not present today, Madam Chair.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Bob. Julia, you want to add anything?
Through the chair, I was just going to say that it's Barbara Mayer Irwin. That's her.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Not in front of us, I know. Thank you very much, Julia. Okay, so so Bob, then would you move a 6.2 for the floor so that if we can open it for discussion?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Okay, so we have 6.2 on the floor. Thank you very much for the verbal update, Bob. Appreciate it. And to all members of the subcommittee, thank you for your work, and to all members of staff who are working with you. Thank you. Do any members of committee have any questions or comments regarding what is in front of us at the moment? Any hands? No hands. Well, Bob. Now, Timothy. Okay, nearly got out of that one. Go ahead, Timothy.
Sorry, I just wonder if Bob and the subcommittee had the list of your study or your research, the three groups like ABC, a list of those properties that the other committee members will be able to look at.
Could that perhaps come to us in an internal email, Bob?
Yeah, through the chair, maybe I'll let Julia also add to that, but given the nature of the work, the listing of those properties for reasons I think Julia can elaborate upon is confidential to the subcommittee at this time,
Yes.
until such time as the work at subcommittee is complete.
Yes, that's what I thought. I don't think internal would cut it. Julia, is that correct?
Through the chair, I believe that is the approach that we should be taking with this work. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Confirmed. Okay, Timothy, so we just have to wait for that, okay? Okay. I see Vice Chair Barb has her hand up. Barbara DeMambro, go ahead.
I was just going to reiterate through the chair what they already said, that the houses that are on the list are confidential at this point. And eventually when we're finished with our work, then we will bring it back to the Heritage Committee.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I think all members of committee can understand the necessity for that confidentiality at this moment in time. Okay, seeing no further hands, we have in front of us, moved by committee member Bob Berube, agenda item 6.2, there it is. That the verbal update from the Heritage Designation Subcommittee regarding the progress of the Heritage Designation focus groups for the Village Core be received. Could I go back to full gallery? Thank you, Ryan. With that in front of us, may I have a show of hands from the committee, please? All those in favor, just raise your hands. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Again, Bob, subcommittee, staff, thank you for all your work. In this particular moment in time where we stand on this precipice of how much heritage can we save? How much can we put in documentation to save? Your work is critical. So thank you very much. Before I go to the date of our next meeting, I would like to just quickly ask Stephen to say a few words. This is Stephen's last committee meeting as a member of the staff of this committee. Stephen is moving on, and I want to thank Stephen for all the work that he has done, everything that he's done for this particular term. Thank you, Stephen. It's been a pleasure to get to know you, and I'm sorry we are losing you. I would prefer that you remained in Richmond Hill, but it's okay. It's okay. We understand. And from me, on behalf of the entire committee, thank you very much for all your work. And as a member of staff of the City of Richmond Hill, it's deeply appreciated. And then perhaps you could introduce Kunal Chaudhry to us, who is going to be taking your place.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Silovitz, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with this committee. The work of this committee, I think, is extremely important in preserving the heritage of Richmond Hill. And I'm leaving you in very, very capable hands. Julia Smith, our heritage planner, has, I think, done a remarkably amazing job since taking over from Pamela Vega, who is returning in the middle of October, and we will have 2 heritage planners on staff to carry forward the work of the heritage designation strategy. So we are gearing up and we're getting more manpower, which I think is very exciting for Richmond Hill. Kunal Chaudhry is the senior urban designer underneath my team in heritage urban design under planning and building services, and will be assuming the role of acting manager effective immediately. My last day with Richmond Hill is tomorrow, unfortunately. I'm just jumping over to the other side of the 404 with the City of Markham, taking on the role of Senior Manager of Urban Design there. So please wave at me if you see me on the other side of the highway. That's our joke. I'm not going too far, but again, it was an absolute pleasure working with you, the committee. I hope this has been a great experience for you in working with us as staff and trying to move things forward on the heritage end of things. Lots of great work being done. And yes, the bad comes with the good, but we're hoping to do a lot more good with this committee going forward. So Kunal, I'm handing over the baton to you. All yours going forward. And I'll wish everyone the best of luck. And we'll see you around, because I don't like saying goodbye ever. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Kunal, would you like to have a moment in time to introduce yourself to the Heritage Richmond Hill Committee, and then we'll get to know you even better in our October meeting.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Silovitz. So I've actually been at the city for about 5 years now. I've been working as a senior urban designer, and in the past as an urban designer, especially on the zoning team as well. I'm very pleased to be working with the committee. I'm going to be working closely with Julia and Pamela on our return, and I do hope to carry the baton forward. Hope the torch will be as bright as Stephen made it to be, and I look forward to working with all the committee members here. So thank you.
Thank you, Kunal, and welcome on behalf of all our committee members. Welcome indeed, Agnes. Welcome, and Stephen, best of luck in all your future endeavors. You will be missed, sir. You are a gem. And Kunal, welcome. And we look forward to working collaboratively with you, and of course the rest of our incredible staff as we move everything forward with regards to this term of Heritage Richmond Hill Committee, which is not going to be easy, but we're doing a pretty good job right up until now. Agnes, did you want to say a word?
Yeah, just a quick question. Did I hear correctly that we're going to have 2 heritage planners?
Yes, Pamela will be returning.
And Julia is staying on?
That's
excellent news. That's excellent news.
Great.
Yes, and just to clarify that, Julia's contract has been extended. Julia's contract has been extended for 2 years from this January 1st to work on the designation strategy, with Pamela. So yes, two bodies is certainly better than one. So yeah.
That's for sure.
That's excellent news.
Thank you, Agnes. As Julia, would you like to add anything?
Not really. I mean, I'm very excited, obviously. Sorry. No, I am absolutely delighted to be staying on. Very sad that Stephen is leaving, but also excited that Kunal is going to be stepping in because he's a very bright and astute colleague. And yeah, I think he'll do his best to make sure that heritage is made a priority. So yeah, but no, I mean, I'm obviously thrilled to have a lot more time to dedicate to the designation strategy because it's such important work. And yeah, I honestly can't wait to really get into it. So yeah.
That's great. Julia, thank you. And we're as excited as you are. And congratulations on your 2-year extension. That's absolutely wonderful news for you and even better news for us in the city. So with that, item 7 on our agenda is the date of the next meeting, which is set for Thursday, October 12th at 3 p.m. Is that okay with all committee members? If anybody has a problem, just raise your hand. We're good for that? Okay. Again, if you do have any problems attending, just make sure that Ryan is informed, and that so we know that you will not be present because we have to have quorum. So with that, I can go to the final item of our agenda, and that is a move to adjourn. Which member of committee would like to do that? Just raise your hand. Councillor Davidson, thank you very much. And all those in favor, please raise your hands to adjourn. Anyone against? No, thank you. That passes unanimously. Again, my thanks to all members of the committee, members of staff who have joined us. Welcome, Kunal. You are joining a very, very erudite group, and we look forward to everything you are going to be able to add to this wonderful committee. Stephen, again, thank you. Good luck. And I will see everybody. We will hopefully see everybody on October the 12th. We are adjourned.